Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of the Brett and Matt Show. As always, he's Brett, I'm Matt, and we're starting our um, division previews for the upcoming draft and just overall what we think might happen based off how teams have filled their needs so far. So with that, we'll get right into it. Today we're going to cover the NFC North and AFC North. So we'll start with our Green Bay Packers right off the bat. So obviously, being the big spender that we know Ted Thompson is, just kidding. We really haven't done much in free agency as far as signing anyone outside of our own team. We made some re-signings, obviously. Some of our own guys. I mean, we re-signed James Starks. We re-signed Nick Perry, guard Lane Taylor, Mason Crosby, LaTroy Guion. We never let Mike Daniels hit the free agent market. So, I mean, we have done some signing, but, Packer fans like myself and Brett would probably like to see Ted Thompson spend a little money in free agency. But obviously, with that not happening, we get really excited about the draft because it's really how we're going to fill, our needs and how the Packers are really going to help their team get better. So, with that said, what are your thoughts that the Packers will do come April?
Well, I think obviously Clay Matthews played the last year or whatever at inside linebacker. Reports obviously are that they are going to kick him back outside, which I find interesting because they have nobody to play the inside other than Jake Ryan.
Hey, Sam Barrington coming back?
I don't care. He's not a guy I want starting. Sorry, Sam. Okay, so at least for this upcoming year, you would have guys like, I think Jalen Elliott needs to be playing more.
Yes, he does.
You still got Peppers, like Neal, they still throw out there at end or outside linebacker, right? And then you also have Nick Perry, who you just re-signed, who I think is like an outside linebacker, right? They don't put him at end. So you already have four guys that I think would be a decent rotation. Now you're going to throw Clay Matthews out there. It just opens another huge hole in the middle. And some people you can question whether Jake Ryan needs to be up there, especially in passing situations. So I think they got a target. Obviously, inside linebacker, nose tackle, or somebody else on the defensive front. I mean, I know they have, Mike Daniels and they re-signed Guion, but Raji's taking his leave of absence, not retiring, but taking a 1-year hiatus or so. So I think they definitely need to address that. It's like basically like right up the middle of the defense. Seems like that's going to be a weakness. So I hope that's where they attack some guys in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you. I mean, I really either drafting a middle linebacker or, as much as I am really upset with drafting defensive linemen and them not panning out so well. Obviously, defensive line, specifically in the interior, is turned into a pretty big need now that Raji's retired. And let's be real, LaTroy Guion, probably calling him an average nose tackle is probably a bit
fair.
More than that should be. So obviously that's a big need. On the other side of the ball, it felt like, you look at the Packers during the regular, last year, and the second half of the season, we struggled like crazy on offense, which in the Aaron Rodgers era, really this is the first time I think I've ever really seen the offense not click. And, so it does make you wonder if the Packers would spend that 27th pick on a tight end, but there really isn't. I mean, unless all the best options that we wanted to draft aren't available, there really, I don't feel like, is a tight end worthy of that pick. But a lot of what I've looked at too has said that the players from 20 to 40, if you had them ranked, there's not a huge gap in talent between there. So I mean, at the same time, maybe we do, but you hit the nail on the head.
Maybe we trade out of that spot if there's not. Just pick up 2 second rounders to move on out, and we'll get more picks.
It's true. And honestly, as painstaking as it is for me to sit there and watch the entire draft and Packers come on the clock and we do something like trade out, I'm like, great, I wasted the whole night. No, I'm just kidding. But, honestly, in this draft, I just mentioned how the talent level isn't that different between players 20 to 40 sort of thing. Like, honestly, we pick up some more second round picks. That's not terrible. I'd be okay with that. So it's one of those things that's got to be patient.
And okay, so we obviously will get Jordy back, which basically he'll just take over for James Jones as like the number one go-to wide receiver, which is great because he's obviously younger and much faster and a deeper threat than Jones, adding something that they didn't have this year. But I still feel like, I mean, the receivers that we had left after Jordy got hurt couldn't get open in one-on-one situations. I think it'd be nice to either get some sort of speed somewhere, either if that's the tight end spot, somebody that can get open there, or somebody with a little bit more wiggle and better route running as well at receiver, which is weird because I still like the guy, obviously Cobb and Jordy, Devontae Adams, they must think highly of, and they've just drafted a bunch of guys. So, I mean, Janis,
It's weird to
Abbrederis.
say that Janis needs to spend the whole offseason working with Abbrederis and how to run routes.
There you go. You have a 6'3" speed guy with some actual skills. But yeah, do you have anybody in mind, say, for like the first round or second round that you'd like to see them target?
Well, I don't want defensive line. I'm trying so hard to avoid that, but ultimately, I mean, if a guy like Ashawn Robinson is there, a defensive tackle from Bama. I mean, we've okay, minus Eddie Lacy, who now seems to be on track to be a good player again if he can keep his weight in check.
P90X, it's legit.
We seem to like drafting players from Alabama. This would be, another year where we draft Nick Saban, defensive guy. So I mean, I feel like he would be an option. There's another guy called or named Ron Butler from Louisiana Tech. He's another big, like 6'4", 323-pound defensive lineman. Good upper body strength. Like, there's no question we need someone in the middle of the defense to stop the run. So as much as I would like to target inside linebacker, unless a guy like Ragland is there, we really shouldn't reach for one. We should probably take the defensive lineman.
Yeah, and I'm actually leaning more towards the other guy from Bama, Jarran Reed. Kind of think he would also fit really nicely if Ragland is there, like you mentioned. And then some guys that maybe would be second, third round picks. Okay, I don't think Spriggs is there that late in the second. Be a miracle if he was.
Oh yeah, it'd be a miracle if he was there.
If he was there, but that would be nice. I know we didn't mention offensive tackle, but I mean the inside of the offensive line is still pretty solid. But I think they could still use some help at the tackle spot. And then, like we mentioned, tight end. We didn't get to see him at the combine. Actually, none of the good tight ends at the combine decided to work out. But I like that Tyler Higbee guy. I also actually thought Nick Vannett from Ohio State, who we did get to see, he had a pretty decent showing as well. Probably more like a third round pick though.
Yeah. That actually second round would be probably a pretty good round to address the tight end spot. At that point, I think, like I said, there's no real elite tight end in the draft, but you can get that solid help that we need and should be able to find a tight end with a little more speed than Richard Rodgers.
We're not even professional athletes. I think we have more speed than Richard Rodgers.
Maybe you do. I can't even run right now, so I'm having trouble walking.
You with your bum ankle is faster than Richard Rodgers.
Call me Steph Curry, man. I got these fragile ankles. So with that said, I mean, I guess, we obviously think the Packers should probably go defense in the first round. Maybe your boy Spriggs from Indiana. Like, I'm kind of sick of seeing Aaron Rodgers get planted on his backside too. So if we went the 27th overall pick with that guy, I probably wouldn't be upset with that either.
Yep, and another guy too that a lot of people he seems to be like number 2 or number 3 offensive tackle on some boards, and in others he's a second round guy. But it'd be Decker out of Ohio State.
I really don't think he's gonna be there when we pick. I think he's gonna be gone. Just my
top 25 pick, you think?
Yeah, for sure. I think, anyways. Not sure where I'm gonna have him going, but I'll figure that out down the road. But So I guess we can move on to our second team, which is the Chicago Bears. And I tell you what, the Bears, they made obviously tons of moves in free agency. We talked about that last week. They had some really good deals. So looking at their team needs, I mean, they're in a good spot where I think they can get a top tier offensive lineman to help protect Cutler, especially since Bushrod left in free agency to Miami, and that signing didn't work out very good. I feel like for them anyways. So, um, something like that. They obviously the first round pick they invested in last year, no one got to see any of. So he's a pretty big unknown. I mean, he might end up being a really good player. He might not end up being a good player. But obviously using the tag on Jeffrey was a pretty important move for the Bears to make. I don't know, bro. Where do you think? Where do you have Chicago going?
Well, we mentioned obviously their defensive free agency signings really helped up the middle, with the defensive tackle, and then they also got the two inside linebackers. But they did recently switch to the 3-4, so I think they could still use another pass rusher to go along with the guy they signed last year, and then maybe another defensive end. So, I mean, in my head, I think they could go with a guy like A'Shawn Robinson. Would be, I think, a good pick for them. And then, like you mentioned, offensive line as well. They need to kick long back from right tackle to the inside to guard. So, like a guy like Ronnie Stanley, you could plug him in at tackle, perhaps on the right side, and then you have Long playing his more natural position, and you actually show up two positions with one draft pick.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. I could see, you mentioned the defense. They did make a lot of sense. I really think they need to address the offensive side of the ball. I think they believe they have the running back of the future. Is it Langford? That's the guy that played a lot instead of Forte. Forte was banged up. I'm pretty sure they feel like they got the future of their running back position set, so they probably don't need to address that early on.
Nice complimentary piece would be nice, though.
Maybe the Bears do something surprising and they draft a quarterback. No, I'm just kidding. That's probably not going to happen.
That's not going to happen early, but I do definitely think probably like a third or fourth round guy. You could get like a Connor Cook or Hackenberg at that spot. Maybe. Cook is one of those weird guys who could be a first rounder, but a lot of people also are kind of iffy on him, maybe dropping him to the second, which would be kind of interesting spot for Chicago if you take a guy at that position when it's not like a huge need, but you got somebody to groom because Cutler's getting older. He won't be there, more than a few more years probably, or whenever his contract is up. I'm sure they'd probably love to get rid of him soon if possible. I don't really know. So that's a possibility. And they could also use a corner, really, as well. So I think a guy like Martin Hargreaves would also be a decent pick.
Yeah, he would be a good fit. Otherwise, a guy like you mentioned, Taylor Decker might be there. Or the tackle from Michigan State.
Conklin.
Yep, Conklin. So, they got some options. It might be one of those things where if Hargreaves falls to the Bears at pick 11, it would be pretty hard for them to pass up on one of the better corners to be able to take in this year's draft. So, but I don't know. I think they should go offensive tackle, but that's just me.
You think if obviously Tunsil and probably Stanley, though Stanley falls, you might take him. After that, are you going Decker? Is he your number 3?
I don't know. I think it's between obviously Decker and the guy from Michigan State. I think I would go Decker ahead of him, but that's just me. Personal preference, I guess.
Fair enough.
Who do you like better?
Probably Decker. Yeah, I think Decker is going to be. It's weird. Okay, so I watched. There was a tape of someone on Twitter. They had like a split screen for 4 different offensive linemen, and they were all left tackles, and you got to see how they set up for a block. And the guy from Michigan State at one point in his set crossed his feet, instead of like kick sliding, he like kind of crossed over. And if you cross you're gonna get just trucked if you cross your feet. You're gonna be off balance, so you have absolutely no base. So that hopefully that's technique, obviously. So that's something you can correct and fix and coach out of somebody. But that's kind of scary to see after being like a high-end level guy. So maybe
That
he
is
just doesn't have the natural feet to just do a kick slide effectively, consistently.
it's a good point. So with that said, we'll move on to Minnesota Vikings. So the Vikings, they gosh, we are the only team that I swear is not active in free agency. The Vikings went on, signed, Alex Boone. They signed Andre Smith. Really tried to shore up that line. They also, who else did they get? They got Michael Griffin, the safety, so they have someone to play next to Harrison Smith, so that should help. On the defense, that was already pretty good. They don't have Mike Wallace anymore, but
Which is not a loss,
not really a
frankly.
big deal. um, I mean, they re-signed Terrence Newman, who played pretty good last season for them. So maybe it must be that Mike Zimmer defense kind of thing. But he ended up playing pretty good. So looking at the moves they made in free agency and holes they maybe had, where do you think the Vikings position themselves to go?
I think their biggest need, if you're drafting for need, is probably wide receiver.
Got to be right. I totally
Gotta
agree.
be. Diggs was good. I mean, he was a lot better than I
He's a lot
expected.
better than I think people were expecting.
They lost Wallace, like we mentioned, which isn't a loss, but he's the guy that played a lot. I mean, Cordell Patterson is useless. I don't really know who else they even have back there. So I think wide receiver is like a definite spot. They can go with a real speed guy if they want a speed guy like Will Fuller out of Notre Dame. And if they need like a bigger body, there's obviously a guy like not Tunsil. I don't know how I was going to say him. Wrong guy. He has a big body, though.
Mike Thomas?
Mike Thomas, Josh Doxson out of TCU is a guy that I like. I mean, if you're going to target guys later in the draft, like a Leonte Carroo is actually pretty good out of Rutgers. And we mentioned safety. You said they signed Griffin to start opposite Harrison Smith, who is a really good safety. But Griffin is 31, so he's already kind of older. I mean, at safety you can age a little bit because you're not necessarily the speed guy that you need to be. But I think a guy like Keanu Neal, Florida safety, would also be a potential pick. Kind of a surprise pick, but I wouldn't put it past them to kind of get some depth for the long term at safety.
It's funny you bring that up, Brett. I'm on here looking at a mock draft right now, and actually, with the second round pick, he has the Vikings selecting that guy from Florida. So that's kind of funny. But no, I totally agree with you. I think the Vikings got to go wide receiver in the first round. They obviously made some offseason moves to try and shore up the offensive line. So I think that was probably one. But if you were to ask Vikings fans, I sit next to one at work, and he would be the first to tell you that their offensive line stinks, that Teddy Bridgewater gets hit all the time. So some of those offseason moves, I'm sure, to try to help that. And then obviously, I mean, they saw Adrian Peterson. They got to get someone. They got to get someone to be able to, you got to have a target for Bridgewater to throw to. So it could be interesting to see. I mean, they're in a good spot where they'll probably have a couple options, depending on what flavor they want to go with. If they want a guy like Will Fuller, who's just a burner, if they want a guy like Doxson or who are the other receivers?
Thomas or
they're Thomas. Yeah, I mean I don't
Braxton
think
Miller.
they'll take. Come on, let's get off the Braxton Miller hype train right now. That is. Do you really think he's going in the first round?
No, I don't.
No, okay. So, or Corey Coleman. I mean, they got some options. But I definitely think we're both in agreement. They will take some sort of receiver, I think, in the first round.
Agreed. And the last team that we got, obviously in the NFC North, is the Detroit Lions. Team that I don't think did a great job of protecting Stafford last year. I mean, Riley Reef is all right, kind of inside or outside. It doesn't really matter where. But they don't have a lot of bodies and a lot of decent bodies up front, so I can see them going offensive line. Obviously, Calvin Johnson retired, and they signed Marvin Jones to replace him, and they still have Golden Tate at receiver. I don't honestly view any of those guys as like a number one, so maybe they just go for depth instead and add a guy that can be like the slot number 3 or another outside guy since you can play Golden in the slot. And then they still have a hole up front, right? I mean, Sue and Fairley left last year, and they
He
signed
did re-sign Haloti
Nana,
Nada,
but
but I
he's
mean, obviously he's seen better years.
definitely. So I don't think it would be outside the realm of possibility for them to go with a defensive lineman either in the first round.
Agreed. I mean, everyone talks about how deep this defensive line class is. Maybe they address that need in the second round. I agree with you though. I mean, they got it. They're in a good spot where they can probably get an offensive tackle that they can really shore up the offensive line and hopefully protect Stafford from getting hit all the time because he's been sacked a ridiculous amount the last couple of years. So they're in a spot where probably like a Taylor Decker or the guy from Michigan State, he'd probably be there too. I don't know if the tackle for Notre Dame will be there at that point, though. He's probably gone.
Probably not. I did have a possibility for them either the second or third round to help with the interior, probably center. Going with like Nick Martin, though, the center slash guard from Notre Dame, since you brought up Notre Dame. So I think that could also be a possibility.
Sure. Yeah, otherwise, I mean, if they wanted, they could get, another guy on the defensive line, too. I mean, I know I just mentioned the depth of the class, getting someone in the second round might be good, but maybe there's someone that blows them away that they're just like, we really want this guy. And you look at the Lions when they had their success. I mean, they had Ndamukong Suh, they had Nick Fairley. I mean, they had two real studs in the interior of their defense and really allowed guys like DeAndre Levy to flow and make plays and do all those kind of good things that the Lions, the 1 year they did make the playoffs, had going for them. So maybe it is time to rebuild that defensive line.
Yeah, and there's a guy that we haven't mentioned yet that I think would be a real good fit in like Sheldon Rankins out of Louisville.
Yep, out of Louisville.
He's going to be I think he could be a pretty good force on the up front against the run as well as providing a little bit of pass rush.
Yeah, I think that would be a good fit as well. So with that said, that wraps up the NFC North. So we'll jump right on to the AFC North where oh boy, I don't even know how to get started with these guys. The Cleveland Browns. So the Browns actually just announced that they signed RG3 to a 2-year contract. So the buzz going around is that the Cleveland Browns are still going to take a quarterback at number 2. Brett, I gotta know what do you think they're gonna do?
Well, here are my official notes that I have open in my Word document right now. Browns team needs. This is literally what I wrote. Everything.
No, what about the left tackle? Pretty shored up.
Everything. That's the only spot. And then in parentheses, I wrote cornerback, wide receiver, offensive tackle, center, outside linebacker. Maybe a safety in the defensive end as well. So I got kind of everything there for the Browns.
They got a lot of needs.
I think you mentioned they just signed RG3. It's only a 2-year deal, and I don't expect him, frankly, to be re-signed after those 2 years are up. Wentz or Goff, whichever quarterback they like better, is going to be the selection at number 2 or wherever they're at number 2.
Yep, they're number 2. Yep.
If they want to go a different direction for some reason because they just really believe in RG3, obviously there's always Bosa and DeForest Buckner on the defensive line / outside linebacker. Kind of depends on how you want to play Bosa for some teams. But then from there on out, it's just got to be best player available. I mean, you got needs, like I said, everywhere. So it's just best player available. Wide receiver, I think, is a pretty big need, though. So, I mean, there's always going to be guys like Sterling Shepard, Braxton Miller, Tyler Boyd there in the second and third rounds. If you go on offensive tackle, there's always the guy from Michigan State that we've mentioned. If he falls out of the first and goes in the second, they've just got a lot of needs. Honestly, they should just trade their second pick for a shit ton of picks. No, don't do that because then you missed out on a quarterback. So don't do that. Just never mind. Disregard that. Take your quarterback and then go BPA.
Yeah, as much as I've been a big fan of RG3 and a big supporter of him, you just can't be trusted, 1, to stay healthy, and 2, you're right. You got to take the quarterback of the future. by doing this, it sucks to be RG3 in a way because he's not going to probably be the long-term answer for Cleveland, but you gotta go where your opportunities are. And it's just a matter if you like Wentz or Goff more. And if the guy's not going to play you theoretically right away anyways,
Probably take Wentz.
I would take Wentz, but that's just me. I would take Wentz and let him sit behind RG3. And if RG3 gets hurt, well, then I guess we'll have a decision to make at that point. But yeah, I think I would take Wentz. It's just you gotta go QB. I think we're both in agreement there. I would be it would shake up the draft, I think, if they didn't go QB.
You would probably so a quarterback would have to fall. Either a quarterback's going to start to fall at that point, or you're going to see a team that sort of needs a quarterback just end up trading up to make sure that they can get one before someone else trades up, right? So, or maybe you just get somebody like Dallas who doesn't really need one, but they're just like, well, Tony Romo. I know they've said.
If I am not a Cowboys fan, but I'm telling you right now, if I was the Cowboys and either Goff or Wentz is there, I think I would take them. I think I would take my quarterback of the future. He can sit behind Romo. Jerry Jones has already publicly said how much he is a supporter of what the Packers did with Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. I think he'd do the same thing.
But hasn't he also said he expects Romo to be the quarterback for 5 more years?
Yes, he has, Brett. And I tell you what, he's got to be delusional if he really believes that.
Well, I'll agree. He's probably delusional.
So I mean, we obviously both have the Browns. It sounds like going probably quarterback in the first round, and in the second round, I think we're both probably in agreement. You have so many needs. Whoever the best rated player is that's on your board when the second round rolls around, you should probably just take them.
Absolutely. And that's how most teams should do it. But specifically the Browns, because they are so bad and they're not like one piece away from competing. They're like 100 pieces away. So just draft the really good players that are available and just let it sort itself out over the next 2 or 3 years at that point.
I agree. So with that said, we'll move on to the Cincinnati Bengals. Bengals are another team. I mean, in the offseason, they made a few re-signings. Obviously, re-signed Pac-Man Jones. The big one they re-signed was George Iocca. Is that how you pronounce that guy's name?
Yeah.
Had a really good season at safety for them. So, I mean, obviously losing a guy like Marvin Jones, that's a big loss.
And Sanu.
They lost them both. Yeah, they need a receiver. I'm just gonna say they should probably draft a receiver. There's honestly, like we'd mentioned a couple times, because the Vikings are in a similar draft position and a similar kind of spot. I think. I mean, obviously AJ Green's much better than Stephon Diggs, but they're in a similar spot where they're both really looking for, I think, a number 2 receiver, and they should be able to get one at their draft position. So I think the Bengals will go receiver, personally.
Yeah, receiver is definitely a huge need. Safety, I think, is another big need, obviously, because Reggie Nelson, they didn't re-sign him. He's older, but he had probably his best season to date.
Yeah, he did.
Makes you wonder if he'd been juicing. Anyway, and I think they could also probably go with some defensive line depth as well. I mean, they brought back Michael Johnson the year before. They still have Atkins, but Pico, or whatever his name is regressing at this point. So I think they could go with the defensive line up front. And there's a guy, I think, like Kenny Clark out of UCLA would be available. Again, I'm going to mention Keanu Neal, a safety, along with Carl Joseph from West Virginia is probably like a second-round guy. I like the receivers. There's a lot of decent receivers, I think, that come out most years. And I've mentioned him before, but the kid from Rutgers could also be a pick in the second and third round, along with Tyler Boyd from Pitt. Some bigger body guys, which they seem to like.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I mean, and it's hard to count out with the defensive line depth this class has too. I mean, they might spend a second round pick on a defensive lineman too, or something. So
very possible. I mean, you mentioned them with the Vikings too, right? Like if you're comparing them, I don't feel like if you look at the teams, I mean, obviously Cincinnati is a little bit different level than the Vikings were, but overall, those are actually some really good depth charts. Like starting, for most of those spots. I mean, the Bengals, I think, for a lot of people, were probably the most complete team this year.
Yeah, until Dalton got hurt, the Bengals were looking really good.
So, I mean, it'll be interesting. They're in that position where they can kind of just draft. Uh, Again, it's almost like best player available, but they might want to just target like one or two specific guys for their biggest needs that help them with this final push that they might be able to make with this team.
Yeah, that's a good point. So moving on to our next team is the Pittsburgh Steelers, which for years the Steelers have been known for defense, and it seems like a lot of their needs fall on the defensive side of the ball now. Obviously, last season, a lot of people felt like they had a super explosive offense. You look at guys they're getting back, Le'Veon Bell. I mean, granted, Bryant, it sounds like is going to be suspended the whole season, so that's obviously a big loss. But you still have arguably the best receiver in the league in Antonio Brown.
Marcus Wheaton is actually a pretty good number two / number three.
Yep, agreed. He can play good. And they signed Ladarius Green, so they get a more athletic tight end. So I mean, the Steelers' offense should be good, but man, you look at their defense. How many years has it been since that we've said the Steelers should really think about drafting a lockdown corner, and they just, for whatever reason, just refuse to listen to us?
We've probably said that 3 or 4 straight years at least.
Cornerback, and they don't ever do it.
Never. They just don't covet them in the first round. Now maybe this is the year that they change. Somebody, I want to say, oh my god, let me find him really quick on Twitter. Justice Mosqueda. I don't know how to say his name, and I apologize for that. Justice Mosqueda, right? He, I think, wrote like an article about basically scouting each general manager and like what their tendencies are going into the draft.
Oh, that's interesting.
Unfortunately, yeah, I think it was on Bleacher Report. Like he did it for Bleacher Report. But you should definitely check that out because I also haven't. So that would be something interesting to read for our readers. Where if you want to kind of get an idea for what teams typically do and what general managers have done in the past, give that a read. But yes, you mentioned it. The Steelers won't draft a corner, probably in the first round. But they should. They really, really should.
A guy like Eli Apple could really, I think, at that value at their spot at 25, that would be a good value for them.
Mm-hmm.
They probably won't, though, so I don't know what the Steelers will do. They tend to surprise sometimes.
Apple, William Jackson's another guy, I believe, out of Houston. And then if we didn't mention it, but I know they've got one Pro Bowl guard, but if they want to get it, show up the other spot on the interior line, a guy like Josh Garnett out of Stanford could also help really solidify the interior offensive line.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, so we're already at the last team of the day, which is the Baltimore Ravens, and the Ravens did go out and they made some moves. Obviously, the big move they signed Eric Weddle, the longtime Charger. They also signed Ben Watson, who played pretty good for the Saints. And then they are the team that picked up Mike Wallace. So take it for what it is, but I don't know. What do you see the Baltimore Ravens doing? Ozzie Newsome's one of those GMs too that historically tends to take the best available player over player for needs. So I'm kind of curious to see what they'll do.
I think outside linebacker sort of a need, right? They still got T Sizzle, but he's like 35 coming off a hurt and an injury. Chris Canty was a defensive lineman that they didn't re-sign. So I think outside linebacker / defensive end is definitely a possibility. You're looking at wide receiver. I know they just brought in Wallace, and Steve Smith is coming back, and they drafted Perriman last year. I honestly don't like any of those guys right now. Perriman I was never high on in the first place. Wallace is trash, and Smith is coming off an Achilles. So it's like you got 2 scrubs and an injured guy. Smith, when healthy, was really awesome, but he's not, and I don't know how to expect someone coming back from an Achilles injury. So I think
No,
they could go wide receiver. Probably not with their first pick because it's a little
probably not at
early
pick
for that.
6. Unless, yeah, probably I don't know. I don't see it.
But I could definitely see them drafting somebody in the first 3 rounds for that position. But yeah, at number 6, I'd say whichever one they like better, Buckner or Bosa, is probably their guy. If Miles Jack happens to be there, watch out for his name to be called as well.
Definitely, they're in a spot where you mentioned Buckner, then you mentioned Bosa and Miles Jack. I mean, shit. Even if a guy like Jalen Ramsey happened to fall, I mean, that would be tough to pass on. I mean, they're in a good spot where I think they were a team last year that, just had a lot of injuries pile up, and they have a lot of talent on their roster, and they have a really good head coach, and I think they're getting all those guys from injury back. Plus, they don't typically draft 6 overall, so they're going to be able to get someone that can make an instant impact right away. That probably on most years they probably wouldn't be able to get. So I don't know. I think the Ravens are in a pretty nice spot to really have a bounce back season this next year.
Yeah, I agree. And you're looking at, you mentioned how between 20 and 40 earlier in this podcast, between 20 and 40 seems to be kind of like a talent bunches up there. There's not a huge difference. But I do think there's probably 5 or 6 guys that most people view as like on the separate tier of like the elite tier. And that would be guys like Buckner, Bosa, and Jack, Jalen Ramsey, and then Tunsil. Pardon me. So they're probably like the top 5 guys. And then depending on the quarterbacks, you might have Wentz and Goff in there. But that means at number 6 that they're guaranteed to get one of those guys that should be like an immediate impact player. And they seem to be all guys that really would be in a fit of need anyway.
Right. Yeah, it just happens to be best of both worlds.
So they're in a great spot there. If they want to adjust wide receiver later, like I said, 2nd, 3rd round, plenty of wide receivers. Braxton Miller, we mentioned him a ton. I just really like Braxton Miller's potential and athleticism. Noah Spence is the outside linebacker type guy that they might be able to get in the 2nd from.
Yeah, I mean that guy's clearly got 1st round talent. He's just a bozo and off field issues. But I mean Harbaugh is a pretty good coach, and if they could get him in the 2nd round with their 2nd round pick, I mean, and say they get a guy like, Buckner or whoever else or Bosa, I mean, yeah, I mean, there's no question they could add a lot of talent to that already pretty good roster real fast.
Yeah, and then I think another spot too, obviously they have Jimmy Smith at corner, and Sharice Wright was also serviceable, but they could probably use a 3rd corner because once Smith got hurt, we were like, wow, who are all these scrubs? So I think a guy like, Mackenzie Alexander, from Clemson, if he's around in the 2nd round or 3rd round, his value has been really weird because some guys really like him and some people say 2nd to 3rd round. So if he's available and they like him, it could also be a great pick early.
Yeah, makes sense. So with that said, that wraps up our NFC and AFC North previews. Next week, I think we'll go with the NFC South and AFC South. Just keep it easy. Yeah, look for us back next week with those 2 previews, and thanks for tuning in.